If I go back to early this year in 2021, there was a video I made where I laid out 21 different projects.
The first project actually on my list is to knock down this little shed structure over here. Build a new garage barn structure. What I want to try to do is build what's known as an orangery off the back of the garage barn. Build a new hoop house. Build a second one of these shed structures. To build like a little dog barn right about here. I've got to repair the high drive on our barn. Replacing the roof on our barn. The drainage in our barn. I need to build beehives as well as a platform to house the bees. I have to put up the fencing for the garden. Build raised beds inside the gardens. Infrastructure work I need to do to get ready for the great pumpkin patch. Put out water lines in the permaculture orchard and up to the top of the pasture. Build some sort of chute. Build some mobile shelters, shade mobiles.
I want a hot dog. I want a milkshake.
Put in an apartment. I want to put together some new t-shirts for you guys.
I want potato
You'll
chips.
get nothing and like it.
I wanted to accomplish all 21 of those projects over the course of this year. And so that was really a big, ambitious goal that I had. And here I am at the end of 2021 now, taking stock and looking back and seeing how I did. And the results are kind of mixed. Now, one might think that in a year where you had that many goals that went unachieved, that year would be a failure. But as I look back on my 2021, I think it's the furthest thing from it. This year has been the craziest year yet on our farm, and I am so overwhelmed as I go and look back on the year. And I figured, why not just take a couple minutes and share with you guys some of the highlights of this year as you can look back with me before we look forward to the future in 2022. And you know, looking back in the early part of 2021, the year did have a somber start. Samson Puddle Duck, our legendary gigantic duck, the star of our most popular YouTube video ever, was starting to suffer some health consequences. Samson was a jumbo Pekin duck, and he had just grown too big to walk, and he was immobile, and so eventually I had to put him down. And his companion Spicy Duck grieved him, I grieved him, and it was definitely the death of a legend on our farm. But he will always be remembered. And I think to me that that's an important part about what our farm does and who our farm is. Because for us, the animals on our farm serve purposes. They are livestock, but they are also living creatures that deserve our love and respect. And so even when a duck like Samson has to get put down and we end up putting him up on our dinner table, he needs to be remembered with love. Another animal that I remember with love is Hobo Barn Cat. Now some of you guys might think, wait a minute, I remember Hobo Barn Cat, whatever happened to him? Well, back earlier this year, we only had one barn cat working outside. Lil Barn Cat, who had recovered from her injuries after the car accident last year, had become a full-time house cat. And so only Pablo Barn Cat was working outside. And because only Pablo Barn Cat was working outside, that meant that we had a rodent problem. There were mice everywhere, there were voles everywhere, there were moles everywhere, and we needed a way to control it. Well, luckily, a mysterious creature by the name of Hobo Cat, or Hobo Barn Cat, started showing up on the farm. He was a male cat who was a couple years old, and for several months he would come and go as he pleased around our farm and would help manage the mouse population. I tried to trap him a few times and actually take him in and make him one of our barn cats officially, but I was never able to catch him, and he remained elusive and free. The last I'd heard about Hobo Barn Cat was he was actually up in the center of Peacham, the town that we live in. Some family had sort of adopted him and was feeding him, and so I guess he's doing okay. He hasn't been back in the farm in quite some time, and luckily we actually had a new addition to the farm over the late spring, early summer when we introduced Ginny and Molly Barn Cat. Ginny and Molly were such a welcome addition to our farm. Molly Barn Cat is just a sweet, affectionate cat who has taken the position as the alpha around our farm. And Ginny Barn Cat, as I like to call her, Ginny Boom Boom, or the Boomer, she is just an absolute firecracker of a kitten. She has become my constant companion riding along on my shoulder as I do my chores from day to day. Other than myself, she's also the most proficient camera creature on the farm. She often will wear this special little tiny camera I have that I can mount around her neck, and it's so fun to watch her adventures around the farm. One of my most ambitious goals of 2021 was I wanted to try to hatch out a total of 150 geese of my own. It was part of my business strategy for the farm this year and part of my business plans. And at first it seemed like things were starting pretty well. We were having hatching class after hatching class. But as I started to look at my numbers, I ended up finishing well below where I had hoped I would end up. And that meant that I would have to pivot and shift my business strategy for the year. Luckily though, the farm business ended up profitable for the year, where we made about $7,500. You can find all the gory details in a recent video that I put out. But just to be able to say that we increased our profits from $5,000 in 2020 to $7,500 in 2021, it feels really good. While it's definitely not going to make me rich, the fact that I'm able to operate our farm and just our farm alone, not even thinking about any of the social media stuff, as a profitable enterprise, that feels really good. You know, the hatching that happened on our farm wasn't the only baby bird controversy that we were engaged in over the course of 2021. Earlier this year, back in the spring, there were some issues with Tractor Supply, the major farm supply shop that you can probably find in pretty much every state in the country.
The people at Tractor Supply, what the heck are you guys thinking? How can you even defend yourself when it comes to what's going on in your stores right now?
You see, Tractor Supply is one of the country's largest retailers of baby birds, and when they have their chick days in the spring where people can go in and buy baby chicks or baby ducklings, they used to keep them in these metal tubs with heat lamps. But in 2021, they actually switched up the way that they were brooding their baby birds in these tower brooders. And while the design seemed clever, as people looked across the country at the way the brooders were set up, there were birds that were sick and dying all over the place. Apparently, they weren't operating them properly.
You left me with 6 of them, David. Taking care of that many is like a full-time job.
And so we here at Goldshaw Farm started a petition to get Tractor Supply to change their practices. I had a conversation with the folks at Tractor Supply. I made a couple of videos to put pressure on Tractor Supply. And overall, the petition that we started ended up getting almost 70,000 signatures. Those 70,000 signatures got the attention of Tractor Supply. And later that spring, Tractor Supply ended up changing their practices back to the traditional brooder system, which I believe saved a lot of bird lives in their stores. And while the Tractor Supply situation was one controversy I dipped my toe into over the course of 2021, even bigger and even more controversial is what happened with hound hunting. It all started back in the summer when a group of raccoon hunters showed up on our farm in the middle of the night.
Can you call the cops? Call the cops? Call St. J Trooper. It's okay, bud. It's okay, bud. It's okay, bud. Hey, it's okay. It's just me. It's just me. Sounds like it back there.
That's her. She's apologizing. I thought it was all right. You know what I mean?
No, it's definitely not okay. I got a duck and goose farm. We got free-range ducks and geese on the other side of this fence.
I'm sorry about that. The guy should have known that.
They had been running across our farm with their dogs, and it had disrupted Toby Dog, and it disrupted the geese, and it was sort of chaos at like nearly midnight. And I went out there, we had an altercation, the cops were called, and ultimately I found out that there are some very weird quirks within Vermont hunting laws, and specifically Vermont hound hunting laws, in that even if you have private property, even if you have properly posted private property, hound hunters can come on your land to retrieve their dogs if their dogs ended up on your land in pursuit of wild animals. As a staunch believer in private property rights, that didn't seem right to me, and so I actually started a petition to gain attention around changing some of Vermont's hound hunting laws. And soon after that happened, magically, the president of Vermont's Bear Hounding Association ended up treeing a bear on our farm, and he came to our farm to retrieve his dogs. The hound hunting situation isn't resolved yet. It's still ongoing. There's still a need for changing the laws here in the state of Vermont to protect the rights of private property owners. It's definitely been a situation where I've gotten a lot of grief for my participation in this topic.
Are you a native Vermonter? Where'd you come from? What the hell don't you get back? Mind your own business.
You know something? When a bear comes and visits you, you're gonna really think it sucks.
Go back to Hartford, where you belong.
She doesn't even go here.
But I feel like it's an important thing, and I actually stand by my position that the laws need to change. I'm not currently actively looking to get a full-on ban of hound hunting, but I do believe that some of the laws need to change in terms of how that bear hounders have control of their animals. Ever since I decided that I wanted a farm, I've wanted to have bees on our farm. The idea of a couple of boxes of pollinators to help the land as well as produce sweet, sweet honey has always been an aspiration for me. And we were able to achieve that goal here in 2021. We added 2 hives to our farm back in the spring, and it was definitely a learning experience for me. While I made a lot of mistakes,
Well, I just got stung.
I also learned a ton when it came to keeping bees, and I feel like I'm ready to do even better in 2022. We produced about 5 pounds of honey in total on the farm, and right now I put my bees to bed for winter, and I'm hoping to see them bounce back to life in the spring. But I also recognize that might not be the case. So I've already gone ahead and ordered bees for the spring of 2022. That'll either mean we have 2 colonies again for next year, or we might have as many as 4 colonies going. It should be pretty exciting. We introduced a new duck breed to the farm in 2021, and they might be our most comical breed of duck. Runner ducks are a special breed of domestic duck. They stand up straight like penguins rather than waddling around like your ordinary duck. Runner ducks are great egg layers, and they're also wonderful at foraging and managing weeds. While I have no plans to get rid of our Khaki Campbell or Cayuga or Pekin ducks, I do plan on adding more runner ducks in the future because they've been absolutely fun to have. The arrival of the runner ducks came with great excitement, but unfortunately we had a lot of health issues with them early on, and we lost several of the runner ducks. But ultimately, as our runner ducks grew to be adults, they became quite healthy and vigorous. And I was even able to strap a camera on 1 or 2 of them too. Another massive goal I had for 2021 was to build a new, larger structure to house my geese in the winter. Because goose breeding and goose eggs and hatching my own geese has been a core part of my business, I knew it was time to expand my laying flock, and because I was expanding my laying flock, they would need a larger space, something that could stay warm in the winter, that was easy to manage, and maybe even in the summer months I might be able to grow food in that same spot. So I enlisted the help of my buddy Alfred.
My buddy Alfred, he lives on down the road. He's a wizard with machines, a genius in blue jeans. Let's stop and say hello.
And he came up with an invention that would bend pipes and allow us to actually form the structure of the hoop house using only the power of my tractor, as well as common steel posts that you get for metal fencing. This was going to be a cheaper and easier way to build my hoop house. Unfortunately, things didn't quite work out that way. Alfred and I were unable to bend the pipe consistently in the way that we needed it to form the structure of the hoop house. And ultimately, I had to go to a plan B and borrow a hoop house structure from a friend of mine. The hoop house that we built ultimately for the winter of 2021 into 2022 is a little bit smaller than the original one that we wanted to have, and it's only going to be temporary. And I plan to try to tackle this problem again next year. I think that ultimately we're going to be able to build the structure that I've been dreaming of. Now, of my 21 goals on the farm, probably the biggest and most important to me was adding cattle. After years of thinking about where I wanted our farm to go and moving beyond just raising poultry on our farm, I knew that the next big step was adding cattle to the farm. And so after a lot of work and a lot of preparation, in October, we ended up adding 5 Scottish Highland cattle to the farm. 2 heifers, 2 cows, and a steer. And I am so happy these animals are on the farm. It didn't go smoothly at first. There was definitely a learning curve for me. But as I worked at it and as I got familiar with the animals and the animals got familiar with me, I feel like we made some real progress and real strides. And I'm excited for what the cattle are going to mean for our farm in 2022 in terms of expansion of our operations, expanding our herd, having calves born on the farm, and ultimately starting a beef jerky company, or maybe not even a beef jerky company, but a dried meat company.
What we call biltong, which is basically...
You're going to hear more about that one for sure next year. You know, looking back on 2021, even though I set out to do a lot of things that I didn't end up doing, I feel like the adventures that we went on, the connections that we made, the friends that we made through YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and all sorts of other social media were so incredibly rewarding. And I'm just grateful for everything that's happened this year. I will say I don't know if I can have another year like I had this year in terms of the craziness of balancing the farm life and my work life and my personal life. But I do look forward to what's next here at Goldshaw Farm. Thanks for watching. If you guys want to check out what our farm looked like in years past, I'll leave a playlist of some of our previous year in review videos. It'll be fun. It's kind of like hopping in a time machine and looking backwards here at Goldshaw Farm.